Hello and welcome, everyone. This is the weekly podcast broadcast of This Week in Science, and this is the part of the show where I say, hey, we're here. We hope you are here. Please start sharing the word, get people in. Let's start the show. If we have technical difficulties, those will be edited out of the final podcast by our wonderful editor, Rachel. And, otherwise, we're here on Twitch, Facebook, and YouTube. Make sure people know that. Anything else I need to tell people? We're live. It's all real time. No AI generated anything. It's just us. Hope you're excited. So we will begin the show in 3, 2. This is TWIS. This Week in Science, episode number 1012, recorded on Wednesday, April 23rd, 2025. Can we capture all the carbon? Hey everyone, I am Dr. Kiki, and tonight on This Week in Science, we will fill your head with fur babies, deathbots, and carbon creativity. But first...
Disclaimer. The end of research funding in America will bring about a golden age, the likes of which the country has not seen since the post-industrial era began. No longer will we waste money on unlocking the secrets of the universe, the wanton fraud of innovation, the political bias of technology, the unholy hubris of the human genome. The pure grift of therapeutics based on science ends now for America. Science will, of course, continue elsewhere in the world as America returns to its golden age of not doing science. But fear not, America. We will continue to bring you the latest science news from whatever country happens to be doing it right here on This Week in Science. Coming up next.
I've got the kind of mind that can't get enough. I wanna learn everything. I wanna fill it all up with new discoveries that happen every day of the week. There's only one place to go to find the knowledge I seek. I wanna know what's happening. What's happening? What's happening this week in science? What's happening? What's happening? What's happening this week in science?
Good science to you, Kiki and Blair.
And a good science to you too, Justin, Blair, Natan, and everyone out there. Welcome to another episode of This Week in Science. We are so glad you are here joining us, spending time to learn more about the curiosity of people in the world and the things they're figuring out. We've brought you a whole bunch of stories that we were interested in bringing, and we've also got an interview tonight. You might notice if you're watching on the screen, we have a wonderful guest, Natan Shahar, who's going to be speaking with us about carbon technology in just a few minutes. And I have stories about finding life, working memory, or memory working, and deathbots. So that's fun. Justin, what'd you bring?
Oh, gosh. The end to studying women. End of researching women problems.
I feel like that just started.
Right. Well, this is actually a very long data collection, and now they're getting to the point where they're putting out results, and they're like, we're gonna stop.
Never mind. We did it.
And then, but unintentionally, the cost of fossil fuels. High cost. Dartmouth University came up with a number for damages.
And we will tell you tonight at 11.
Yeah. I could just say the number, but then it would ruin the whole second half of the show. So we'll wait.
Yeah. Nope. You're teasing it there a little bit. It's wonderful. All right. And what do you have in the animal corner, Blair?
Oh, I brought some fur babies. Are they actually babies? Do they actually have fur? Tonight at 11.
Depends on both.
It's gonna be a long
Alligator
show.
bites. And then if we have time, I brought the carbon impact of food.
You know, I forgot. There was a story I almost
Which
brought.
is an interesting coincidence. I didn't do that on purpose either. So
There was one I almost brought about a
Birthday
lion
has nothing
biting.
to do with it.
A lion bite found in a Roman gladiator fossil. First evidence of that.
I saw that, right?
I didn't bring
Yeah.
it, but I that you reminded me of it with the alligator.
here it comes. There it goes. It was brought. Look it up,
There
everybody.
are stories about the lions in the Colosseum in Rome biting gladiators. We
Yeah.
now have evidence. Yeah,
It
that's
was the
great.
first time we've seen actually.
Hey, you did the story. That was it.
That was the story. Didn't even have to wait till 11. Look at that. Look how efficient. What if instead of teasers, we just came out and like talked for 5 minutes? I think we could get through the show.
That's what the first part of this show is supposed to be, Justin. I don't know if you remember, but it was originally the
The heading is
plan.
like,
Anyway,
quick science stories, but yeah, that's the way we go. We roll with it. As we jump into the show here, I do want to remind everyone that subscribing to TWIS as a podcast is possible on your favorite podcast platform. Please look for This Week in Science and subscribe. And if you have your friend's phone or device where they have podcasty listening stuff, make sure you subscribe them as well. Just like get in there, say, boop, subscribed, and that's great. And then they'll be surprised with science every week. We're also on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch, broadcasting Wednesdays, 8 p.m. Pacific time, and sometimes other times, but get in there, subscribe, hit the notifications, and you will be able to watch us live before all of the errors, mistakes, and others are hopefully taken out of the final podcast. For all this, we have show notes. You can look up other links for the stories and everything at our website, twis.org. Now it's time for the science, yeah?
It's
Y'all
brilliant.
ready? All right. We are starting the show differently. We just did our quick stories. That was fantastic. We are starting the show tonight with an interview. Our guest is Natan Shahar, Chief Strategy Officer and founder of Standard Carbon's Carbon Bridge technology. The development has the potential to allow fossil fuel use to become carbon neutral through carbon dioxide emission capture and conversion back into fuel for storage and use. He has a Master of Science in Environmental Engineering and believes in human innovation to solve the climate challenges that are facing us. Thank you so much for joining us, Natan.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really an honor to be on the show.
Yeah, we've spoken, and I'm very interested in the technology that you've been developing and how it works, all this stuff. And I'm hoping that we can, bring some of these, the background and the basis of the science to the audience tonight to understand what's different about what you're doing. So, carbon capture, conversion, like really, what is the main problem that your technology is trying to solve?
So we address two fundamental issues. The first issue, which you mentioned, is that since the beginning of the industrial era, which, as Justin suggested, with the end of science research, that era might be coming to a close anyway, in which case we don't even have to worry about it. But assuming that we continue this post-agricultural based society that we have been burning fuel and other substances everywhere to essentially move things and make things hot. And that's what gives us electricity and cars and trains and planes and everything, all the wonderful things that we enjoy, from our food to our clothes and everything else in between. It all starts for 300 years plus with burning fuel.
And it's increasingly a staggering increase because it's been a staggering increase because it's been every 10 years, that 10-year period, we use as much fossil fuel as we have used over all of the history of using these fossil fuels.
Correct.
And as another 10 years goes,
more.
we double every 10 years. And it's a really radical.
And it's set to increase as well. Yeah.
We individually consume more, and with the artificial intelligence revolution, we're poised to consume even more energy. And you couple that with the rise of the rest, meaning that the other 7 billion people on this planet will join the current billion that have a sort of first world standard of living, and that's a exponential increase in our energy consumption, which, as things currently stand, means an exponential increase in burning coal, natural gas, oil, everything else that our dear dinosaur ancestors left for us to incinerate. So that is the first problem, which is that we can address what comes out of that process, which is carbon dioxide, and prevent it from changing our climate at a speed that is unmanageable. Or as Elon Musk, said years ago, pumping all the CO2 in the atmosphere is probably the dumbest experiment in history. I don't know if he'd agree with that now, but that's what he said at the time. The second question that we address, the second major issue that we address, which is less obvious, but I'm going to dig into it, is long duration energy storage. And that's actually what, in many ways, kind of drove me to start this, which is that we do have one of the biggest stories of the past 10 years is renewable electricity production. So literally in the past 10 years, solar power and wind power have gone from these relatively niche, expensive, totally government supported sources of energy to the cheapest, most scalable, most available sources of electricity on the planet by far, right? I mean, it's not even close, especially solar panels. Unbelievably cheap and scalable and fast to deploy and finance. But the issue is that, it gets dark at night and there are clouds, which is so annoying. And as a result, running your economy solely off of solar panels requires either that the bromance between our dear President Donald Trump and Xi Jinping, the leader of China, leads to transatlantic electricity transmission cables, so that when it's sunny in China, they can give power to a dark US, and when it's sunny in Mar-a-Lago, he can give power to his dear friends in Shanghai. But the issue is we don't know what the tariff rate would be on that transmission cable. So as a result, we need to store the electricity from these solar panels. We can't just ship it globally, as many have suggested. But there's so much politics required for that it doesn't seem to be happening soon. Even they talked about running a transmission cable from Australia to Singapore. It was going to be the longest sort of international transmission cable, and it was unfortunately recently canceled because of the politics dealing with Indonesia and everybody else. So we need to store power for not minutes, not hours, not even days. We need to store weeks and months worth of power to backstop solar and wind and kiss the fossil fuel era goodbye. Otherwise, we will always need fossil fuels to balance out renewables.
So batteries, right?
The other side.
Can't
batteries, right?
Can't batteries hold energy? Like I put batteries in my flashlight, and my flashlight's there for months. So
correct. So the issue is that if I take my phone here with the lithium-ion battery in it, or my father's Tesla, and I turn it off and put it in, off mode and go away, if I come back a month later, it will have less charge in it than when I started. In the case of my phone, the battery would probably be dead after a month, even though it's off. In the case of the Tesla, maybe 50% of what I had when I left it, because batteries naturally lose their charge. That's putting aside the fact that the energy density of batteries is about 100 times less order of magnitude relative to fuels, liquid fuels, or liquid fuels, liquefied natural gas and liquefied, or liquid fuels, or even on a mass basis, natural gas. But on a volumetric basis, you would have to liquefy the gas. So on a mass basis, the energy density is about 100 times less. And that means that you need an exorbitant amount of material for lithium-ion batteries to provide the scale of storage. You know, today, if you look at all of the incentive programs for batteries in the US, in Europe, and different jurisdictions, which talk about long duration energy storage, they mean, 6+ hours, which is a huge improvement, because all the battery producers today are, all the battery projects that are going in the ground today are almost all chasing 30 minutes to an hour's worth of storage capacity. So 6+ hours is amazing, but 6+ hours will do nothing for you in the winter in a sunny climate, where you typically can have a week or two at a time of all cloudy days. I live in Israel, and while we do have a dry season where we have sun 6+ months of the year, in the winter, it does happen that we'll have a week or two with clouds every single day. So
I live in Portland, Oregon. There were clouds for like 6 months.
Yeah, I don't know how you do that. I can't handle that.
It was a lot.
And there was like Denmark when I was there. It was the winter was 4 hours of sunlight, something ridiculous. Like if even that, like you get it gets pretty intense. Now there's one thing that batteries can do that somewhere in between, which is that you can use them to charge up overnight when there's a lot of cheap electricity from the grid. It'll still be coming from fossil fuels and what have you, and then store it up overnight at a cheaper rate, because that electricity is always being fed to the grid. So there's still ways that you can use batteries to at least improve your personal economy. But
batteries are tremendous. I'm not arguing
You're not knocking
against
batteries.
them at all. Not at all. No, it's just the opposite. What we're doing benefits tremendously from the battery deployment. We're just driving in a different lane.
Yeah. So let's talk about
than
like
batteries.
so let's talk about the lane that you're driving in. You're doing
Yes.
this carbon dioxide capture conversion. People have been working on this for a very long time, and we've got, scrubbers and other technologies that have been implemented in various manufacturing and industrial applications. But what
the
what
dear
are
leader
you
of the United
doing?
States has in fact commanded that we all call it clean coal for some reason.
Yeah, clean coal, right? Let's clean it up and
Well, if he says
We're
it,
supposed to
must
call
be
it that.
right.
I don't know if we actually do anything, but that's what we're supposed
That
to call
was
it.
last time, right? I
No,
haven't
that was
really heard
recent.
of-
That was
oh,
recent.
okay.
No, it
because that
came
was the
back
first
around.
administration.
All
too.
the old
Okay.
hits.
Got it.
they've been doing it for
There's no
20
science.
years.
There
Come on,
is.
everyone.
Just published a scientific paper. He said it's clean coal. What you want to peer review that statement?
Cool.
That's it.
That's there we go. So what can you walk us through your technology and like what you've put together and like
Yes.
how you're solving
Absolutely.
this problem, like what you're doing?
Yeah. So we transform carbon dioxide into natural gas. So CO2 into methane. That's fundamentally what we do. We take raw combustion exhaust emissions from any source. So we go to the chimney of a power plant, a coal plant, a steel mill, could be an automobile exhaust, anything that's burning fuel. And we separate the constituents of that fuel from each other, the carbon dioxide, the nitrogen, and the water. Yeah, amazing. Okay, here's our process flow diagram. That's what happens in our carbon capture module, the processing of the raw exhaust. Then that carbon dioxide we store as a liquid. We compress, chill, and store as a liquid. And we store it as a liquid at room temperature, keep it in a tank, and we save it there for the next step. This part of the process is driven by heat, which we generate internally from the downstream processes that we have here. Then when we have renewable electricity available, or waste electricity available, or affordable electricity available, it could be any of them. But the point is, when we want to use electricity, it doesn't have to happen constantly. When we want to use electricity, we then run an electrolyzer. In our application, we're using a low pressure alkaline electrolyzer, which is the sort of most mature, simplest approach to splitting water into hydrogen for decades. And with the hydrogen that we produce from the electrolyzer, we immediately inject it into a reactor with the carbon dioxide to produce methane. Now, the reactor is called a Sabatier reactor after Jacques Sabatier, the French chemist who invented this process more than 100 years ago. It is very simple, 19th century chemistry. So, Justin, to your point, there was science in the 19th century, and maybe that's, if we would just limit ourselves to the technologies that they had 150 years ago, maybe we'd be better off. I don't know. Anyway, so the Sabatier reactor has a nickel catalyst, and it's an exothermic reaction. CO2 plus hydrogen produces methane and water. So the water we recycle back to the electrolyzer. The heat, since it's an exothermic reaction, we recycle back to the carbon capture unit. And now the methane we've produced, we feed into the original process that was burning fuel to begin with. So instead of that power plant or whatever is burning fuel needing another molecule of fossil fuels, they have just received fuel from their own CO2 exhaust. So we can create a closed loop on the carbon atom within any combustion process.
Okay,
And
how closed?
more than 99%.
Really? That's impressive. I mean, if this was, if you were talking about 20, 30%, I'd say that was still a huge deal.
No, and
but if it's
so let me answer the original question Kiki mentioned. We're not so brilliant when it comes to more than 99%. We are using an amine solvent-based carbon capture system that has been around in industry for decades. The reason why you don't see it everywhere is because of the business case, not because of a technological limitation. So using an amine solvent to scrub CO2 from a combustion exhaust is very easy. I mean, this is the technology that Carbon Engineering, that Bill Gates backed company up in British Columbia, is using to take carbon out of the air, which is much harder because, you know, carbon in the air is 0.3%. Carbon in combustion exhaust is 1% to 20%, depending on the process. So it's much more concentrated, and capturing it with an amine solvent is easy. The issue has always been essentially two. If you're going to purify that carbon dioxide to food grade so that Coca-Cola will buy it at a good price, well, now it becomes very expensive, all of that post-capture processing and purification, because the FDA doesn't want you to put, you know, arsenic-laden CO2 in drinks. But that might be going away soon,
Yeah.
so could make it easier. The
New secret ingredient.
Well, you know, in the good old days. So,
and all kinds of extra ingredients.
Okay. Right. So that's what prevented them selling the CO2 really profitably, because of the post-treatment processes, not the CO2 capture itself. And then, so what they're left with is, okay, we've captured the CO2. What do we do with it? We'll just put it in the ground. Well, it turns out nobody wanted it in the ground, because when they started injecting CO2 in the ground, they had these annoying little, you know, mini earthquake things and sort of, you know, explosions of liquid CO2 coming out of these wells that weren't really easy to seal. And it cost money and didn't generate any return. So the whole thing was driven by regulations. And Exxon said, well, I could put $1 billion into a carbon capture system to satisfy the current administration, or I could put $100 million into political advertising and just change the regulations in the next cycle. And frankly, the next election comes up faster than I can deploy capital to do a carbon capture project anyway. So I might as well just invest the money in lobbyists. It's a better return. And so that's why for decades, carbon capture has not advanced as much as it could have from a technological basis. So, which is great because we had an off-the-shelf technology there to put into this sort of package to go from A to Z, from CO2 to natural gas. Now, the other big piece of this story, as you see here, is the long duration energy storage, because we're taking intermittent electricity and we're turning the intermittent electricity into methane, natural gas. And once you have natural gas, you can store it forever and dispatch it whenever you need it. So, the extreme example you mentioned, Denmark, I'll one up you. If you go to McMurdo base in Antarctica, they have 6 months of sunshine and 6 months of complete darkness. Let's say that they decide they still want to do science down there, and they want to go, Mayflower on the president of the United States and declare, city on the hill independence, and they don't want to buy diesel fuel from Texas anymore, whatever, and they're going to be energy independent. So they say, we're going to install tons of solar panels, we're going to have the penguins clean them, and we're going to, with the 6 months of sunshine, produce enough natural gas locally to give us 6 months of power during the dark winter in McMurdo. And that way, we're never going to take fossil fuel shipments from the mother country ever again. We're going to be totally independent down here. They could do it. You can't do that with lithium-ion batteries, but you can absolutely, with solar panels, natural gas gensets, and some CO2 tanks and compressed natural gas tanks, store 6 months worth of energy in this way. So it's a complete solution to running an economy 100% on renewable power. And for me, that's the piece I'm excited about, because it opens the door not just to the environmental impacts, but also energy security. Taiwan, right? They have 11 days of natural gas storage before the lights go out. If the Chinese put a blockade and the U.S. decides, they don't really feel like doing anything about it, just because. So for them, they have tons of renewables in Taiwan, and they're deploying more. This gives them the ability to produce natural gas from the renewable electricity and continue to exist and hold out for a much longer period of time than is currently the case. And the list of applications in that category go on and on and on. So yes, we have a carbon capture and utilization solution for existing fossil fuel infrastructure, which is everywhere. But we also have the long duration energy storage piece that really is the holy grail of the energy transition, because once you convert solar and wind into base load, then all the arguments for fossil fuel production really melt away. Because that's the point that the lobby has been hammering on. If you go to the folks in the fossil fuel industry and their advocates, they'll say, well, solar and wind is really just a nice to have toy, but fundamentally needs to be backstopped by us. We're the mature adults in the room that keep the lights on. So here we can come back and say, no, thank you for all of that excellent parenting, but we are ready to, go our own way and, pay for our own speeding tickets or whatever it is. So that's the big part of the value. I mean, that makes sense.
The value, where historically it would have had to have been, oh, I'm going to do this and it's carbon credits and it's an investment, or you have to do it because of regulation. I'm wondering though, like this particular method, like it is circular, but you still do have energy input. Like, how does the energy density of the methane out like correspond to like the energy use that goes into it, like as you're, capturing it in these various places?
Right. So the processed end to end that we have is a 60% efficiency measured on electricity in to heating value of natural gas out basis. We're currently, and what drives that primarily is the efficiency of the electrolyzer, which produces the hydrogen. We're currently working on a new sort of variation of the product, which will bring the efficiency above 80% by using a solid oxide electrolyzer as opposed to a low pressure alkaline electrolyzer. But there is an efficiency loss, just like you'd have with a battery. So you get less energy out than you get in. But that's okay. I mean, I always say, the revolution of the past 10 years that we've seen, and it's really been an incredible thing to watch, because I remember, how people related to solar in 2015, 10 years ago, is so different than it is today. Today, you have basically infinite, cheap solar power in the wrong place at the wrong time. But it's infinite and it's cheap. It's just not where you need it. And it just doesn't happen to be operating when you want it to be. Other than that, it's amazing. So the fact that you need more solar, more fundamental, joules of electricity in relative to joules of natural gas out, that's okay, because the value of the methane is fundamentally different than the value of electrons. I mean, you see it even in the business case. It shows up very interestingly. It's interesting how the financial markets for these commodities illustrate the scientific reality. It's cool to see those two worlds overlap. Electricity is the fastest moving commodity market on the planet. It gets a new price every 5 minutes. I don't know of any other product which gets a price update like that every 5 minutes for a physical good. I mean, movie tickets maybe, or whatever, or Broadway show tickets right on a website. That's something else I was bidding on. But right. But the electricity markets in Europe and in most zones in the US have 5-minute spot markets, because you can't really store electricity very easily. And so therefore, once it's produced, those electrons need to go somewhere right away, which is why you get negative pricing, because once the electricity is produced, it must move on the grid because it's moving at the speed of light. There's no time to think about what I want to do with this. Versus natural gas, they don't sell it with a new price every 5 minutes. Natural gas, I think you can some hourly pricing, but typically it's a daily price for natural gas. That
is what you were just saying too. Living in Denmark, there's an app you have that tells you your price of electricity, so that you can decide whether or not now is a good time to run the dishwasher, or if I should wait an hour when it's predicted to be heading lower. Right? It's not something I've experienced in the U.S. very much, but there is an hour by hour app, like where if you run it at the wrong time, you could be paying 10 times the price you would be paying it at a different time, because it fluctuates quite a bit because they're not so energy independent there.
Correct. To your point, and right, in the U.S. we haven't brought it to the consumer level to that degree yet, though New York City is invested billions in doing that. I mean, they rolled out smart meters for almost every single customer, which gives that level of granularity to really, they're pushing this. But the point is that when electricity is produced, it kind of needs to be used, as opposed to natural gas, which when natural gas is produced, it goes into these titanic reservoirs. I mean, the natural gas pipeline network in North America alone is sized for the coldest day in Chicago in the past 100 years. So they have months, more than 6 months worth of storage capacity there beyond what's needed relative to the peak demand. Forget about, regular, 100-year blizzard. So once you produce that gas, it doesn't need to be sold for months. It can just sit in the pipeline network and in these storage reservoirs, virtually forever. And Europe has a similar system, not quite as built out, but similar.
So, I mean, what we're seeing happen in Europe, they're developing very much a circular economy where they're really pushing towards trying to consider all the cradle to grave costs and all of the things that are necessary, and try to what it seems like you're doing is, instead of taking more natural gas out of the ground, it is, now that we've got all this fossil fuel and other stuff that we're using, and electricity really, so any electricity demand to heat an apartment building, to do anything, like whatever that produces in terms of running a heating system, that can be the off-gassing, the emissions can be then taken back into the system and then used locally or globally in the entire system. So like you mentioned New York, and I know that one of the things you're focused on is starting to get developers and building owners in New York to put your systems. This isn't like big scale industrial all the time, but to put these systems in the buildings themselves, so that buildings could be managing their own emissions.
It's a great question, because this is actually, I was thinking like, my first thought was scaling up, but then it was like, oh, there's plenty of carbon in a scaled up system to pull from. How far down can you scale it?
Exactly.
So we can go down. I mean, it's possible. We could go down to the single, home level. We haven't approached that market at all because of the logistics of executing in that space are so much harder. But there's no technical barrier. We are actively selling, and will be deploying in the urban context, specifically in New York City. That's really part of the genesis of this whole business and idea for me, because I'm originally from New York City, licensed engineer in New York State, and I was working in energy efficiency consulting for the real estate industry in New York City when I started this company about 6 years ago. Basically, there's a law in New York City called Local Law 97, which puts one of the highest prices on carbon globally on buildings. So it was passed in 2019. The first year of implementation of this law is now in 2025. Literally, the first sort of penalties for compliance will go out in the next few months. $268 a ton. So any CO2 emissions above the threshold that each building has will be charged by the city at $268 a ton. To put that in context, that's more than 2.5 times the European Union cap and trade carbon price. That's more than 2.5 times the typical Paris Climate Agreement carbon price. So I'm told there are higher carbon prices out there. I'm not aware of any market.
Oh no.
Oh, it's
no,
too bad.
we have
too
some
bad that he's
internet
frozen,
issues.
Because here's the thing that puzzled me about this, though. Like, we're talking about the carbon from the end user. It's like sort of like being charged for the plastic when you've bought a plastic bottle of water.
Hey, are you coming back?
You had
your internet cut out for a second.
You've been kind of paused in your, so we may have missed. We may have missed some of what you're saying.
Our internet overlords are not happy. Apparently, the AI decided to
Yeah. So a moment ago, we were in New York, and we were discussing that the charge for going over their carbon cap was high, and so they may be motivated to do something about that.
Absolutely. They have a major issue. I mean, on top of it, New York City is difficult because they have very intense weather there. So they use a ton of energy because they have brutally hot, humid summers and lethally cold winters where if you don't have heat, you freeze to death, you die. So heat and cooling is not optional. And the buildings are very more than 100 years old. The infrastructure is more than 100 years old. New York City is unique in the world in the sense that most of the world was built post World War II because Europe was bombed to smithereens, and so they rebuilt. And then the rest of the world was not, industrialized to the same degree at all. So everything in Asia and everywhere else was built post-war. The Northeast Corridor of the United States, I mean, even California wasn't developed to the same degree pre-war. The Northeast Corridor of the United States has unique luxury, cities like New York, Philadelphia, Boston, also Midwest, Chicago, of being fully built out pre-war. And so they have all of this legacy infrastructure that you can't just retrofit. Now, maybe we should invite the US Air Force to just clear it out the way they did Berlin, and then we can start afresh. But
We're talking about environmentally
and I would put Denmark on that list. Not for the bombing part, but for they don't have earthquakes and they've never been bombed. And they've got like it's crazy. Like some of the downtown architecture is from the 1600s in these tall buildings. And it's incredibly they've done you go rent a place in an old building in Denmark, and there have been upgrades. There's usually like dual pane windows and all that sort of stuff, but it's also insulated by stone. It's like living in an old castle. It's like it gets cold. Like there's all concrete buildings.
But in terms of energy use,
so some of these
like. How did these retrofits that you saw over the years working in the energy efficiency realm there, like how do those compare to the ability to actually just,
But are the buildings producing the carbons? Wait, aren't the carbons still at the power plant?
Okay, yeah. No. So these buildings are heated by what's called a Scotch Marine boiler. Okay, it is.
This is some East Coast stuff. This is some East Coast stuff.
We don't have. What I was referring to. On the West Coast, you don't have weather, so this doesn't come up. Okay, I mean, from the perspective of us on the East Coast, Californians, or West Coast, there is no weather.
When people talk about the boiler in the building, nobody in California knows what the heck that
nobody
is.
knows.
Never heard of it. Okay. Never seen it.
So once upon a time, okay. In New York City, where your ancestors came from before they made their way west to the golden land of opportunity, they lived in some form of building in New York City. Doesn't matter what the building was. They lived in some form of building in New York City, and in the basement of that building, there was something called a boiler, which happens to still be there. Now, 100 years ago, that boiler had a coal pit, and there was a gentleman standing there in the coal pit.
Young child.
But don't worry, it was clean coal.
An 8-year-old boy clean coal. With a shovel.
An 8-year-old boy, okay, with a shovel. He was breathing deep, but that was okay because it was clean coal. The president told us so. And so let's say this young 8-year-old boy was shoveling coal into a enormous furnace, and that coal was then burned and heating up water inside this boiler. The water turns to steam. It would go up into state-of-the-art 1920s one-pipe steam system radiators The steam flows up beautifully through the building, through the pipework, through these radiators. It pushes all the air out. You hear this beautiful hissing from these gorgeous cast iron radiators. As the air comes out, they fill with steam. These radiators are very, fortunately, from an energy perspective, sized to enable you to keep your windows fully open on the coldest day of the year, because God forbid you die of the Spanish flu epidemic of 1919, 1920. So building code and practice at the time is to size your heating system so that you can be totally warm even when it is a freezing blizzard outside with your windows completely open.
So efficient.
So
No.
you don't need insulation
Not
for the
really.
building because the windows are open anyway. You're essentially in a tent. And
So there's no room by room control. You're explaining there's no dial you can turn it down. If you start to sweat in your apartment in the winter, you need to open the window is all, obviously. Right?
If you want fresh air in your apartment in the winter, you need to open the window. There's no mechanical.
But you don't have control over, like, is it just piping through the building? Can you have it divert around your room?
No, because the way the system is installed is that the risers feed the radiators I mean, people have retrofitted to individual radiators to throttle the flow of steam in and out. And that can help and is very helpful. You can tighten up the system to make it more efficient. But fundamentally, it's designed to be a simple gravity-fed system. The steam goes up, it condenses in the radiator and flows down via gravity back to the boiler and then rises up again. And meanwhile, our young gentleman who's breathing in the clean coal just keeps shoveling away to keep the process going. So over the years, we replaced the coal shoveler. Maybe it wasn't so clean, not sure why we had to replace him. But over the years, we replaced him with first oil-fired burners and then now mostly natural gas burners and pipes. But the infrastructure of the building stays the same. You have boiler feeding steam into the distribution network, all the radiators in the building. There is virtually no insulation in these buildings at all. There's no mechanical ventilation, so the only way to get fresh air is via opening the window. The temperature controls on the steam system are much better than they have been historically. There are a lot of things people have done to make it better, but nowhere near to the level of having a personal individual thermostat. And so, you still tend to use the window as a thermostat. If it's too hot, just pop that window open, get a nice cold draft. I mean, what's nice, I can tell you, it does give you that nice campfire feel inside your apartment because you have this blazing hot radiator next to a nice cold draft. It's like, like a snow camping experience. It happens to be you're burning, 6 times more energy than you would need to be warm, but it's fun.
And then I assume that even if everybody has the diverter or the turn off knob in their apartment, and everybody's got it turned off because it didn't happen to be that cold that night, the furnace is still burning. It's unregulated by people turning the knob to divert.
No, it's regulated by pressure. Running. So the boiler, it runs based off pressure. So the boiler runs in cycles to keep a certain amount of steam in the system, kind of at all times.
Okay.
So there is regulation. No, you can make this system much more efficient. And they have improved the efficiency, but you would
I'm trying to solve pre-industrial era problems. I'm still working on them.
No, we just established science is canceled.
It was canceled. Everything post industrial is canceled. Now I'm trying to go back and solve how do we make a better boiler? Oh, they already did it. Well,
have you tried magic?
So you could scale it down to an individual building to help save the amount of to grab the carbon that it would be producing in these boilers and then to reutilize it to keep those running. Yes,
so we can take off-peak electricity and
Right.
the CO2 in the chimney and turn that back into natural gas to feed the boiler. And through this process, we can fully electrify the energy input to the building. So now this building, instead of taking natural gas from the Marcellus Shale, is producing its own natural gas locally on site. So, you know, energy independence for New York City. Maybe they truly will secede this time, right? If they're energy dependent. And
And redundancy
then,
also. Yeah. So if the electric grid goes out, you've got your methane. You've got something you can burn
correct.
for power.
Yeah.
You still have
Anybody who's in
heat.
New York City doing Superstorm Sanji, myself included, can tell you that the fact that the heat still worked was really a nice thing, because there are folks that were not so lucky, and you know, going a week without heat in the winter in New York City is uncomfortable. So the point is that you now have this ability to fully electrify the building, and if you have electricity available from a renewable source, like the almost 1 gigawatt Empire Wind project, which is nearly complete, but was recently frozen because we want to drill for natural gas in Long Island Sound. I don't know, whatever. We just froze it just because. Thank you, Mr. President. But assuming that he unfreezes it, they're going to bring that project and others online, and New York City will soon have access to nearly infinite renewable electricity on an intermittent basis, mostly offshore wind. And they've made major investments, and New York State has poured billions into this, as well as private investors. And and if you look at the interconnection queue in New York State, you can see just gigawatts and gigawatts of batteries, solar, and wind being brought onto the grid to feed this energy transition in New York City. It's pretty incredible, actually, how the oldest, from certain respects, but you know, the richest city in the world has really gone all in on the energy transition. And we're helping them offer a path, because if you were to replace the heating system completely, if you were going to say we're going to rip out all the radiators, rip out the boiler, and we're going to put in electric heat pumps, then the project becomes logistically almost impossible. Because well, first of all, you know, I had one engineer I spoke to, he said he was thinking maybe we could put all the tenants on a cruise ship for 6 months while we do the job, because we need to go into all the apartments. I'm like, where are they going on a 6-month cruise? It's like, I don't know, maybe like a
just park it. Just park it. Just have a
I'm like, just park it. What? Like one of those like British.
They got a view of the lady for the next 6 months. They got to go through some tourists on their way to work.
Harbor.
Yeah.
And the last time we had people sitting in the harbor for that long was the British during the Revolutionary War. That's where they put all the
the Gowanus Canal. Well, there's nobody going up and down the Gowanus Canal. Park it right there. Just don't touch the water.
You know,
so you have the logistics of the people living there. You have the logistics of actually doing the retrofit. You have the cost of all of that. And if you're in not just a single family home, you're looking at multiple units, multiple stories. Easier to just
all of those logistics. And even the biggest issue on top of all of that, the biggest issue is that when you design a heating system, you have to design for 100-year blizzard, 100-year storm. You cannot design for the average. So what that means is, let's say we say we're going to put in electric heat pumps, and on average, because they have a COP of 2 or 3, and you know, there aren't that many super cold days. Most of the time, it's 50 degrees Fahrenheit outside in the winter in New York City. So you're going to get really fantastic efficiency. You're practically heating your apartment for free.
Yeah.
So they say, on average, we don't even need an electrical service upgrade to each apartment, or maybe very, very small. We have enough electrical capacity almost there, and replace the panels, add a few more switches, but the wiring can handle it. We're ready to rock. That works on the average. But if you say, well, what a second, what if we have a 100-year blizzard? Let's look at the data. Well, under that circumstances, the COP drops to basically 1 because it's 0 degrees Fahrenheit outside, and so you're just not getting the efficiency off these things that you get otherwise. And the 100-year blizzard is 2 weeks of weather like this, or 3 weeks of weather like this. Now, to keep people alive, that means we need to upgrade the electrical service now by, I don't know, 10x. And those are the numbers. So a building that currently has a 1 megawatt connection to the electric utility now needs a 10 megawatt connection. Now multiply that by 50,000 buildings in New York City, and you start to think, wow, it is a shame we shut down that nuclear power plant upriver, Indian Point. That was maybe we shouldn't
Yeah.
have done that. Why did we do that? But that's done. And
there's
then
another element of that I want to jump on real quick, which is that all of the electricity transmission has tremendous amounts of loss moving it from one place to the other. Like our grid is completely leaky, so you're getting half the bang for your dollar by the time it goes from the power plant to your transmission line. Anyway, your massive loss of energy is taking place.
Correct. So the logistical, it becomes impossible. If you want to upgrade the electrical service at the point of use to those capacity, the cost, the staging, the work, the labor, the materials. I mean, fortunately, all the material prices have jumped, 2 to 3
Higher.
times because we don't need to buy them from China anymore. That's helpful. But it becomes just almost impossible, and that's why we are focused on the urban division, is because we feel we've offered a path. I mean, if we zoom out the history of standard carbon, so I started this company because when I was working with buildings, my clients came to me and they said, okay, local law 97 is passed, it's 2019, first year of implementation is 2025, what do we do? And I said to them, well, I read the law. Now, if they do what's written in the law, you should sell all of your buildings, every single one of them, as fast as you possibly can, because it's going to be really difficult to do what's in this law. Electrification and everything is very ambitious. They said, try to just exit. And they said, well, I live in a co-op. This is my home. The co-op is not selling. We live here. Okay, everybody owns, or it's a condo. Everybody owns their home in this building. We're not going anywhere. What do we do? And so that's when I started thinking. It happened to be at the time I was reading Dr. Robert Zubrin's Mars Direct about Mars missions, which he published in the 1990s. And there he says the way to do Mars is we're going to produce rocket fuel on Mars from the Martian atmosphere, which is all CO2, using the Sabatier process. And he said, if we do that, then we don't need to ship all of this fuel to Mars. We can produce all the fuel we need for the return journey on Mars, and everything becomes viable for NASA. Now, we've yet to do that on Mars, but, maybe this administration will do it. Who knows? In the meantime, I said, if they can do it on Mars, for sure we can do it in the chimney of a building. It seems a lot easier. And I read about it, and I saw that actually, the European Union and Japan have been publishing papers about this process for decades. It's not a new idea at all. We just needed the product ready to roll it out. And so that was my start. And then I started the company, and then my investors came in and they said, why would we be busy with small building projects? That's silly. Let's focus on US Steel and power plants and coal, and everything else. And so all of our focus was on utility scale, and we've had a lot of progress on that front. We're doing some major projects in the utility area. And meanwhile, sort of Local Law 97 in New York City was just marinating there over the past 6 years. Comes January 2025, there were attempts to repeal the law. It's still on the books. And now you have many, many thousands of buildings that are facing tens, sometimes hundreds, millions of dollars worth of fines under this law, and they have no path to compliance because they can't do the heat pumps, and they're stuck with their legacy 100-year-old boiler steam systems. So we said, let's offer to help. We really can approach it. So we started reaching out, and we've had very explosively positive feedback in what we're doing there. Because
I imagine, because it also sounds like both the law dug a ditch that they figured out. Well, you build it, make the law, and they'll figure out how to do it. And then so they needed the solution. They've created already the law that requires the solution. They just didn't have the solution yet. And now you're showing up with it. That must be pretty welcoming.
It's I can tell you the past 6 months has been an incredible journey in this respect.
How do we think it'll? But so New York's going to be great, but that's one city. It's a great city, big city.
That's a very big city.
But our other cities don't have the same regulations. Is it how do we?
Well, so here's the good news.
How do we influence the transition?
Regulatory driven.
Yeah.
So to your point, the location with the largest, fastest, most impressive build out on a per capita basis of renewable energy on the planet, I believe, is Texas. Okay, which is a completely islanded section of the United States with respect to energy. Unlike New York and Pennsylvania and New Jersey, which all trade energy with each other, electricity, I mean, ERCOT in Texas zone is an island. They're the Lone Star State in many ways. And they do not have incentives there supporting renewable energy, but they have explosive investment in renewable energy that is the envy of Europe and elsewhere for a lot of reasons. But what drives it is that it makes good business sense. And what we're doing here makes good business sense as well, because what we started this conversation with, the different priced commodities, electricity and natural gas, the off-peak or curtailed renewable electricity is often sold for free or negative prices. It can be extremely affordable. And then the natural gas price is often much higher. So you have a spread between the cost of electricity you have to put in relative to the value of the natural gas you produce. That arbitrage opportunity between two different types of energy, electricity and natural gas, drives the economics of this regardless of the incentives. Now, obviously, there are major incentives, and the global market for incentives is enough that you don't need every location to have its own regulation. So, for example, in the case of New York City, not every building needs to install this system right away to comply. It's enough for a lot of them simply to buy low carbon natural gas from elsewhere. So we can go to US Steel out in Pittsburgh and we say, we want to turn all your CO2 emissions into low carbon natural gas using renewable electricity. And then we can ship that natural gas via the pipeline network to all these buildings in New York City. And they're getting low carbon gas. So they've achieved compliance. They can defer investments in full electrification to now the 2040s, as opposed to entertaining those investments today. And in the meantime, we've just decarbonized US Steel and promoted enormous renewable investments at the same time. And by the way, it works on a global basis. Japan is the most aggressive, synthetic natural gas blending regulations on the planet. They'll take it from anywhere. So if we didn't need it for New York City, you could produce all that low carbon natural gas at US Steel, ship it to an LNG terminal and ship it off to Japan, and they're happy to buy it.
then the other part of that is then you'd want to install those in Japan, right?
Yeah,
because
exactly.
even if you don't have the regulation, you can also have a lot of areas that it's just way more expensive. Like I don't imagine much of the world is getting the energy as cheaply as America does. So even without fines, there's people who are paying that for their energy consumption. I mean, again, I'm going to keep using Denmark just because I had that as an example. They also have radiators for all of their buildings. There must be a boiler somewhere. I just assumed it was magic that they think the thing's heated up. But they turn it on at some point in the year, and and then there's always a hot pipe on the wall, the one you're not supposed to grab onto if you lose your balance. But the energy costs there is much higher than I assume anybody in New York is paying for their energy. And so even without
you're correct.
a regulation requiring them to make this step up, they're already seeing a benefit if they can reduce the consumption end of it.
Yeah, look, the transition to renewable energy offers so many benefits that appear in the pocketbook. The existence of ridiculously cheap fossil fuels in certain parts of the world creates all sorts of market failures, I guess that's what economists would say, that distort behavior, because basically you have something almost for free, like the Marcellus Shale with fracking, right? So the Marcellus Shale is a great example. That I remember when that started. That was the beginning of my career in New York City, in the right before subprime. So the early 2000s was when that started to come on, and people were talking about how natural gas was going to be a bridge to a clean energy future, whatever, because that was the beginning of fracking. Suddenly, New York City had access to infinite, cheap natural gas for the first time, ever. They never had anything like that. So you had an explosion of people investing in natural gas conversions. They moved off oil to natural gas, which was good. Asthma rates went down dramatically. It's been measured, and it was good for climate and all sorts of things. But to your point, it distorted behavior on the energy efficiency investment side, because energy was so cheap, sort of like nothing justified itself on the business case alone for energy efficiency, because we just had this kind of free resource. So if you go to places in the world where that doesn't exist, then this is very valuable, or where the infrastructure doesn't exist. New York City was blessed with two things. One, they had infinite cheap natural gas from Ohio and Pennsylvania in the Marcellus Shale, and they had the pipeline network already built out to deliver that gas for pennies. Now, if you go to Japan or India, they don't have the fossil fuels. They do have the demand, and they don't have the infrastructure. So for them to say, let's just build tons of renewables and leapfrog this whole fossil fuel addiction to begin with, because it's bad for their security and it doesn't pay financially, there's an enormous value proposition. And so we're absolutely approaching those markets an opportunity as well. And Europe probably is the biggest example of this, because what's happened with Ukraine and Russia has just made the focus on synthetic natural gas in Europe explode. I mean, now even more with Trump, Europe has really had a wonderful time. First, they lost their Russian gas, and now Trump wants them to pay, 80 times the market price for the privilege of asking for American natural gas. We don't even know if he'll, they can use it, but they get to ask if they pay, right?
Well, there's
this
the story of coal, right? When they made the locomotive. I'm going again to pre-industrial again. I don't know why I keep the whole evening. The story of coal.
We've gotten stuck in comics.
They made the locomotives like 10 times magnitude or more efficient, and it sunk the price of coal because suddenly all the locomotives moving all these goods across the country are going to drop the cost of it. They're going to use just a whole lot less of it. Because it dropped, because the price dropped, the demand went through the roof. Because now little Timmy, who used to only be able to shovel into the coal into the building, could now afford to bring some of that coal home to his little hovel in the basement across the street and heat his own little furnace. So now he could even stay warm in the winter. And actually it became accessible to everyone. So the consumption became, they actually had to start producing more coal after the price dropped. So no matter what, whether there's a current price incentive or just an efficiency incentive, it's going to be something that continues because if the price is low enough, everybody's going to want to use it, and then there's opportunities for efficiency everywhere in that system.
Yeah, and I think
seems like a great position. Yeah,
and I think that's the key here is being able to understand the different markets and what what their needs are, right, and how what value proposition are they going for? Is it a pocketbook bottom line? Is it because they want to be part of a leapfrogging energy transition? Are they seeing the future of the world and climate and fossil fuels and going, we need to restructure, so there are lots of different motivations. But in the end,
but if we can
how much money do they want to spend on it?
But if we can prevent more of those carbons from going just directly back into the atmosphere.
Yes.
Because again, cheap fuel just gets used more. I mean, that's just how that works. It doesn't, more countries are going to be using it. More important now than ever for it to be efficient and not be sending all those carbons back into, into the global warming.
I'd love to see. I'd love to see more countries try and pull together to create the circular economy incentives, so that more of the technologies are, it's all put into this ethos of, trying to repair what we've done, maintain what we have, and not cause more damage. Take sustainability into account along with the economy, and use science, which is canceled, to help us get there. We do have more science stories, and we've been talking about this for a while now. Natan, is there anything you'd like to wrap up to tell people about your company and your technology that we haven't really hit on?
Well, thank you. I really appreciated the opportunity. It's really what we're excited about, making the energy transition a reality, accelerating that, making it as fast as possible, and that's really the underpinning mission of what we're doing. Turning renewable power into baseload power. So yeah, I mean, it's been a real privilege to discuss it on the show. Thanks.
Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for joining us. Everybody, if you're interested, we'll have a link to Standard Carbon's website, standardcarbon.com. If you are interested in learning more, they have a white paper on the technology, so you can dig in deep on kilowatt hours and conversion frequency and efficiency and things like that in there. And there's more there at the website if you are interested in learning more. And everyone, this is This Week in Science. Thank you so much for joining us for this conversation and for this episode. If you're enjoying the show, please tell your friends. Sharing is caring, right? And if you also enjoy the show, head over to TWIS.org. We are listener supported, so your support is what allows us to keep going. If you're interested in doing that, you can click on the Zazzle link and go search through our store of merchandise. A portion of all those proceeds goes to support us. Lots of Blair's art is all over cool products and things that you're going to love. So go check that out. TWIS.org, click on the Zazzle. Also, there's a Patreon link, which is our crowdfunding community platform. So if you click on the Patreon link, you can find out how to become one of our supporters, active in helping us produce this show week after week. We really can't do this without you. We appreciate your support. All right, we're going to come on back now. It is time for that wonderful part of the show that we love to call Blair's Animal Corner.
She loves our creatures, great and small. Biped, millipede, no pet at all. You want to hear about animals? She's your girl. Except for giant pandas and squirrels. There's Animal Corner.
What you got, Blair?
Alligators.
Go Gators!
Yes, watch out. Alligators, they bite.
Really?
Yes, and so some researchers wanted to know why. Scientists at University of Florida and Center College in Kentucky, they wanted to know, do alligators bite people or do people ask to be bitten?
Wait.
Can you guess?
People are not paying attention to the gators. They're asking for it. No.
Now, keep in mind, it's from University of Florida, so that should also key you off.
No,
So
it's not people's fault. It's all the gators. I don't know.
So to reach their conclusions, the team analyzed 3 centuries of records from 1734 to 2021 on human-alligator interactions, and they used something called the Crocbite database, which has recently been rebranded to crocattack.org.
Oh, that's much better.
They augmented that information with internet searches, literature review, and communications with wildlife agencies. Then they classified each case by the level of human behavior risk, no risk, low, moderate, or high. So was the human behavior no risk, low, moderate, or high in terms of provoking the alligator, or essentially what I was saying, like asking to be bitten, right? Most bites occurred following moderate risk behaviors, such as swimming or wading in areas known to be inhabited by alligators. The highest proportion of fatal bites occurred after high-risk behaviors, like deliberately entering alligator areas. And in contrast, low and no-risk behaviors, like walking near water or being present on land, pretty much never resulted in attacks. So, shocker, alligator bites could be prevented if humans were just aware of their surroundings and minimized risky behaviors like walking small pets near bodies of water, swimming where alligators are known, stuff like that. So
the result of the study, this is my interpretation. Why do Floridians get bitten by crocodiles?
Alligators.
Alligators, sorry. Why do, let me correct. We can edit out when I said the wrong thing. Why do Floridians specifically get bitten by alligators? It's because they deserve it.
I mean,
it's because they went where there were alligators.
Either they deserve it, or if you want to be more charitable, you could say they could use more education.
Well,
don't poke the alligators.
Where to start with that comment?
Right. So the researchers say the most surprising finding was how high the percentage was for humans engaging in risky behavior. So this is what was really shocking, is not that risky behavior resulted in alligator bites, but how much risky behavior was happening. Humans, rather than alligators, are at fault in the vast majority of cases where bites occur. Yes, and this was a Florida-based study, but alligators are found in places besides Florida, so this database is much more than just Florida. But you can ask yourself,
Canada? How often is this happening in Canada?
Not Canada.
Okay. Well, I'm just saying.
We're talking Florida, we're talking Georgia, we're talking Mississippi, we're talking Louisiana, stuff like that. So,
but I mean, haven't we talked about this with like dogs, and how when people don't understand the signs that dogs are under stress or feeling aggressive, that they get bitten more often, right? You're it's people not picking up on behavioral
but
signs that.
But there's not irresponsible alligator owners who
Right, and
left
so-
their
But we are
alligator
going
off the
into
leash.
alligator
The dog bites,
habitat.
I'm blaming
Yes.
the humans. I don't blame the dogs. I blame the humans who are having
Justin,
the dogs.
You're getting at something here. So when an alligator is
what it
found to be
is. I can't wait.
responsible for a bite, they remove that alligator, and most of the time, that alligator is euthanized. And this is a problem for a couple reasons. Now, remember,
with mountain lions.
alligators were endangered. They were only recently removed from the endangered species list. There was a crisis in the bayou as a result of the disappearance of the American alligator. So taking away these megafauna that are our ecosystem architects, like they build swamp the existence of alligators. So if you are taking them out and euthanizing them because they bit somebody, and it was the person's fault, that's a problem, right? And so ultimately this identified a need for a better educated public, more creative messaging, better signage, fencing, I don't know. But something this is basically, researchers say this identified a gap that needs to be filled to be able to reduce risky behavior from humans. But also, you know, you could see if, I don't know. It's tough because this happens in California with mountain lions also. When a mountain lion attacks a human, they are found and euthanized. That is the process. How many of those mountain lion attacks are because that mountain lion is sick or too used to humans or whatever reason that they should be removed? And in what cases are people going, oh, kitty? And so I think this is a larger question of when we remove and euthanize wild animals from spaces that humans go into that are wild spaces. That's the other crazy thing about the mountain lion thing is these are hikers, usually in back country. You're entering into a wild space. That is not the mountain lion's fault that you are in the middle of nowhere on a trail.
A lot of it is our running trails and our housing is ending up where mountain lions are now. So we are
That
living
also.
there now.
Yep. Yep. And so communication strategies are the goal now of this research group to try to figure out, is better signage the thing? Is a public awareness campaign the thing? A new TikTok dance? Like, what is it going to be? Do I sound a million years old when I say that?
Good job, Blair. Welcome.
What are those whippersnappers like?
But I'm wondering, you mentioned
yeah.
how there's lots of videos of, like, you know, the gator wranglers and people who are like, this is how you catch a gator, this is what you do. And I'm wondering how much the prevalence of these videos is influencing behavior. I saw a video.
That's really interesting. So there was, a few years ago, pretty recently, there was a rash of people approaching seals and sea lions on beaches because of some viral videos. And so that was a huge issue. There had to be this huge public awareness campaign. Hey, messing with marine mammals is a felony. Like, stop. Also, you could die. Like, don't do that. And
There
so
was
it
a
took a
very
long
recent
time.
news story that was I saw that was titled "Why Are Sea Lions Attacking People on Beaches?" And I'm like, oh gosh, what is this strange ailment that is coming over these sea lions, that they're going and attacking people? And it turns out, no, it was because people were approaching them.
Right.
Like trying to get 100%.
selfies. 100%. Yes,
Ridiculous.
absolutely. Yeah. And I think, somebody brought up Steve Irwin in the chat. Don't blame Steve Irwin. I agree with you. So part of the thing about Steve Irwin was he didn't cut out the parts of his show where he got bit by things.
Yeah,
so that's
he tried to
important,
be
right? He
responsible about it,
demonstrated
yeah.
how wild these animals were, and he talked about how dangerous the things he was doing were, and when he would get bit or a snake would wrap itself around his neck or whatever, it was in the show. It's a really important piece of showing the real world of what it is to be around wild animals.
And he did continue the messaging of these are wild animals and don't do this. I'm educating you about this. Like, I've learned how to do this.
And then he died doing it. So also, like, learn the lesson.
Yes, although I will say, the thing that he died from was such a weird freak accident that really it's truly wild that none of the venomous snakes got him, crocodiles and alligators didn't get him. It was a weird stingray shot to the exact right place in his body at the exact right time.
How embarrassing for all of the crocodiles and venomous snakes too. Like that. Like we couldn't take him down, but that got him.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, I think don't approach alligators.
Yeah, I mean, but that's an interesting question, right? So, what do we do? How do we educate? There are signs everywhere. People say, alligators, they're dangerous, but how do we protect people more from themselves?
Yes, and if somebody provokes an alligator and gets bit, should that alligator really be euthanized? That's just my...
Right.
I mean, I'm not going to change society. That's probably not going to change, and that will continue to be the way things go because human life has to be valued above animal life, and I understand that.
The alligators might be like those human hunting tigers in India.
I mean, we have discussed on the show how they have their own teamwork, which is one of my favorite stories I have ever reported on in the history of this show. So alligators are pretty amazing. Now, moving from wild animals to domesticated, my other story for the Animal Corner is about your best friend, or I should say my best friend, not Justin's best friend. Dogs. How do dogs fit into social networks? People will call them their fur baby. People will call them their child. People will call them their best friend. People will call them their sister or their brother, depending, right? There's lots of kind of funny tongue-in-cheek ways that people refer to dogs. But researchers from ELTE, TWIS University, set out to explore the precise role that dogs play in human social networks. So they compared human-dog relationships with human-human relationships using 13 relationship scales. The way this was set up, I think, is very interesting. The data set we'll talk about. But their study overall, what they revealed from the data they collected, big fat asterisk to be returned to in a moment, is that the owner-dog relationship can be interpreted as a mix of child and best friend relationships, combining positive aspects of the child relationship with, this is interesting, the lack of negative aspects of friendship, blended with a high level of control over the dog. So you have all the best parts of having a kid without any of the negative pieces. The fact that a friendship usually does not have the negative aspects of a spouse or a child or anybody else because, you separate and then you come back together. You just hang out with a friend, right? And then on top of that, you have high control over the dog. The power dynamic is very specific. I mean, I feed my dog her food every day. I am in control of all of her food, right?
Right. You set meal
when
time,
she goes outside.
everything.
Yes.
Yeah.
100%. Owners often rate their relationship with their dog, this is crazy, as superior to any human bond, which already now I take extreme issue with. Okay. I disagree.
This says a lot about people.
But overall, their data set showed that people rated their relationship with their dog as the best relationship that they had in their life. Like, oh my God, who are these people answering these surveys? Okay.
Now, hold up. Removing immediate loved ones and family and your closest friends. Compared to most of the people in this world, you have a better relationship with your dog.
Oh, sure. But that's a big caveat.
No, well, these are just people with a few less close human relationships. That's it.
I think,
and then
I
they're
think
there, and then you're there.
I think it's the you know, non-judgmental love. The dog is doting on you.
Sure.
There's the emotion.
So
you know,
however,
you
I
don't-
will just say,
don't
I'm
have to
picking my
talk
son
about
over my
bills.
dog. That's happening.
Oh,
Okay?
totally.
You what?
I would pick my son over my dog.
Yes, I
Always.
exclude the close loved ones and family. If they don't have that, then you can see how it would be
Yes,
the
but look at the
perspective.
graph. Look at the graph.
Okay. Look, here's
So we have
an
graphs.
important thing then, because
We should
because
talk
we've
about how they
talked
look.
about this in the past. What if there was a way to genetically modify an animal to become more intelligent
Stop.
and sentient? Because these people will go for it, and here's why: they have the child that can't grow up, and now as a parent, all you want to do is provide your child with the things they need to mature and progress and learn and become self-sufficient. Why
never
isn't
will.
that same instinct there for a dog owner to teach their dog to be self-sufficient, to grow and to learn and to,
Go run with the pack.
yeah,
we will
because
free
there
you one
isn't
day.
a part of that seems to be like, I just wish, just for their own self-confidence, my dog could go get a job. There's no leaving
Please,
the nest.
though.
Let's talk about the science, though.
Let's return to these graphs because first of all, support. The dog is rated higher than romantic partner. That sucks. I want to give every single one of these people.
Much. Like, what is
in
this scale? It's
okay,
just
okay, but sure, even if it's the
is
same, even if
overlap.
it's the same, I want to give these people a hug. Like, like what is Oh my gosh! And then negative interaction child is the top, and then romantic partner is like neck and neck with child. Like, oh no, I can't. Oh, and then yeah, satisfaction. They're all pretty much neck and neck. And then relative power, of course, dog is way up high. Child is a little lower than that. Best friend is pretty much non-existent, which makes sense.
Right?
They're your friend. You don't have control over them. But okay, so this finding was 700 dog owners who related 13 relationship characteristics regarding their dogs and 4 human partners: child, romantic partner, closest relative, and best friend. The results showed that owners rated their bond with their dog as the most satisfying and their dog as the best source of companionship. I'm going to say that again. Owners rated their bond with their dog as the most satisfying and their dog as their best source of companionship. Yikes. So also, of course, there's a big fat asterisk on this because the sample was volunteers. These are people who agreed to take the survey. They were like, what dog owners want to take this survey? So first of all, anybody who's answering surveys about their dog, usually very intense dog mom or dad. Like the dog identity is strong. If you're looking at that and you're like, this is how I'm spending my free time, is taking a dog survey, right? So already that's a self-selection. Also, I mean, I'm just going to throw out there, maybe if you're busy with your human companions, you don't have time to take a dog survey. You have other priorities, right? But so because this is a self-selection, people who are mad at their dog probably aren't going to take a survey about how great their dog is. So I think ultimately this is a really tough data set. Like, honestly, you should be going into waiting rooms at vet offices And you should be questioning people there because you know they have a dog and you're seeing them at the best of times and worst of times related to that dog. That dog might have just cost them $2,000. That dog might have just gotten in a fight with somebody else. That dog might be ailing and you're giving them support. So it kind of, you need to find a way to find people for this survey that is not, hey, who wants to take a survey about their dog? Because it's gonna create a very specific selection of people. So ultimately, this feels skewed.
I don't want to make
you're onto something.
I don't want to make this political.
Sure.
But if you look at the dog versus cat states, for some reason, they kind of look like the American political map.
What's a dog state and a cat state? I don't know what that is.
Where dog ownership outweighs cat ownership.
There are reasons for that. It's called space and urban population centers. And
Could be.
I think there's
That could be.
more rural.
So maybe the people
more
who are
urban.
dog people
Less
are just living
backyards.
more rural. Maybe there's less people
Not
around.
always, but
Maybe the
yeah.
people that are around aren't the people that are really, the most friendly.
Zombie Tom Hanks says, do the same survey to cat ladies.
Yeah.
Right.
Great.
So, I mean, is this something that is generalizable across pet ownership, or is this something that's very specific to dogs because of that perceived that bond that you have because you're their mom?
Right. Yes.
But I wonder though, because now I'm like, do people feel supported by their cat, like at all?
Yeah, good question. I mean, the cats are less needy, right? So definitely, it's a different power dynamic.
Have you met my cat?
Your cat is a dog, but cats, cats are usually more choosy about people that they hang out with. Cats can entertain themselves. But cats also still can tell if you need them a lot of the time, right? Like they can tell if you're upset or if you're sick. So there is some response, which I think is really interesting. The other thing I wanted to mention about this study before we close this out is that, I have to find it. So the situation where the dog relationship was rated superior, they also found that more support in human relationships correlated with more support in dog owner bonds, which suggests that dogs complement human relationships rather than compensate for their deficiencies. So this is like really unexpected. The researchers, where's the quote? The researchers expected that people with weak human relationships would rely more on their dogs for support. But the results contradicted that. In the sample, people did not seem to use dogs to compensate for insufficient support in human relationships. In fact, having both augmented how they felt about things. So it could be having an outlet, right? Like if you need to just touch something or someone, like you can pet your dog, right? And you're not leaning too heavy on your humans. It could be
that gets annoying. Those people who just want to keep petting you all day. It's just stop.
Touch is important. Touch is part of our sensory system, right? And so like it's you're joking, but have you ever just had the urge to like be in physical contact with one of your loved ones, like not in a romantic way, but just touch them, just like lean up against them or grab their arm or rub their back or whatever it is, right? And so having the dog, I don't know, I'm just guessing, could have something to do with that, relieving some of that tension and reliance. But I also think having a human around could fill the gap where your dog cannot talk you through a difficult problem that you're having, right? They're excellent listeners, but they don't give great advice. So having a human around,
they also don't point
help.
out your flaws, which is nice.
Yeah, they don't go, oh gosh, did you shower today?
Did you really? Is that? Do you really want to stand by that decision? Have you not thought it? All the dogs just, all right, we're doing it. Whatever. We're go swimming. I can't even read that sign.
Yeah.
No big deal.
Oh no, an alligator.
Oh no.
Yeah. Anyway,
Bringing it back.
so dogs, what role do they play? A little bit of everything? Nothing? We don't know.
You did have some
Oh,
cow
sure.
story
I'll give
related
you
to carbon dioxide. Maybe this is the decarbonization technology of the future.
Yes, I'll give you the headline. It's pretty simple. Feed the cattle a more whole diet. They burp less. That's pretty much it. This was in a lab looking at a cow's stomach, seeing how rumen interacted with different foods and different proteins. And they found that flaxseed and pea protein supplementing dairy cattle's diet could change the way that fermentation occurred in the rumen, and that produced less methane, which should make less cow burps and farts, which should reduce the greenhouse gas output of cows. Aside from the fact that also the other thing, they think that the flaxseed and pea protein, because they're not making as much methane, actually more of the energy from the food is directly going into the meat and or dairy. It's not getting lost at the same ratio. And so if that's the case, then they're going to reduce the overall haul that meat is doing in terms of carbon output, creating meat and dairy, which is pretty high. So that's a lab-based study. Next step is to feed the flaxseed and pea protein to dairy cows and see what happens, see if it mimics what they had in the lab. The thing that I wanted to throw out about this, some food for thought, is, hey, I wonder if it's okay for those cows doing all that burping. And I wonder if feeding them more flaxseed and pea protein and having them burp less, have less fermentation going on in the rumen, might they actually feel better? Might they actually live longer? Might they actually produce milk longer?
Better milk, more milk, right? Yeah.
I don't know.
And one of the questions I was thinking of is, have they looked at the methane production of cows naturally grazing out in the open as opposed to dairy cows that are on a diet that's provided to them in one place, not heading out, not doing a lot of exercising either? What's the difference?
Right. Absolutely. And so, you gotta capture that methane, feed it right into that machine, hook it up to a cow. Anyway.
I'm trying to picture a cow exercising. What are you talking about?
They frolic, don't you know?
Yeah.
Come on.
For like a minute, and then they're like, oh, okay.
If they have space, they can frolic quite a bit. But also keep in mind that even when they graze on pastures, a lot of the time it's full of non-native grasses. It's more homogeneous. Yeah. Yes, exactly. And so it's not quite what a wild cow-like thing would have eaten with a rumen initially. So that's also, I know it's tough. It's tough to kind of pull it all the way back and see what's going on.
I think we need to ruminate on it a bit. You all done? Do you have any more?
I'm done. No.
You're done. All right. Justin, you going to give us a number? What was your news at 11?
Oh, yeah. The story.
About climate change some more.
So they've been trying to figure out, like, whose fault is it, and what was the cost? Like, are companies responsible for the global warming catastrophification of the planet? And one of the arguments against it was, who can say that it's my molecule of CO2 that contributed to this damage versus this other one? And so they kind of were like, well, yeah, none of that matters. We're going to just do a general assessment of how much carbon, 111 of the biggest carbon-oriented companies, going back as far as 137 years, have contributed in terms of carbon dioxide. So they had 1,000 different computer simulations translate those emissions into different changes in the global's average surface temperature by comparing it to the world without any of these companies' emissions. And they came up with a number. What was that number?
What was it?
Roughly, in this estimation, there was a high and a low, but they came up with $28 trillion in just climate damage. So this isn't
Ever?
That's many dollars.
that's not including everything, but this is just sort of the climate caused damages direct. So this isn't your lung breathe. This isn't just general air pollution. This is weather and climate change induced damages. And then they broke it down. Actually, a big chunk of it came from just, I think it was 11 companies and groups. So, yeah, 28 trillion. That's how much, according to this calculation,
so I have a
owed
question
to the world.
and I
a little
apologize if this is like, if you explained this and I totally missed it, or if it's obvious and I'm not getting it, but that's such a big number. That's a number that's so big. I can't, it's basically infinity to me. I can't conceptualize a number that large, right? So I guess my question is, what use is this information to us? Like, are people using this to do lawsuits? Like, how is this data helpful?
So yeah, so this is, as actually the contribution is half of that, so around 14 trillion, I guess.
So infinity still. Got it.
Would come from the Saudi Aramco, Gazprom, Chevron, ExxonMobil, BP, Shell, National Iranian Oil Company, Pemex, Coal India, and the British Coal Corporation, just to name 10. Now, are those 10 companies, do they have resources worth $14 trillion? Probably. That number sounds like infinity, but it really might not be. Well, I think it's more of a putting a thing into perspective. You know, a way that you can look at it is
our national debt is $36.22 trillion. That's about $106,111 per person in America.
Yeah, I mean it's as far as a number goes, what you could be looking at is damages, and you could be looking at it in terms of, here's a number that we're going to use as, say there was vandalism on a property. Well, the first thing that they would try to do is assess for whoever, as a charge against whoever did the vandalism, is what do you owe for having done this act of vandalism?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Blair,
you
your
try
question,
to come up with a number, and it might not be 100% accurate, and it might not be whatever, but it's to put it in the ballpark of what is the consequence of having done this act of vandalism. What's the charge to fix it? Or, how much damage did it do? And so it's kind of, I think, just a sort of element in doing that, because no one has, we've talked about, there has been a lot of talk about corporate responsibility on this issue for the companies that have benefited and profited from it. But there hasn't been really an assessment of what that number looks like. Now, if I'm looking at it, I'm thinking this number looks really low, actually, for the amount of time that it's gone on, for the amount of damages that have been done, and how much of that time did we know that it was contributing to a problem? And the answer is, even if we only knew 20 years ago, that's most of it, right? Like,
no, we understood the heat trapping nature of carbon dioxide since the 1800s. So
yes.
Yeah.
But even if we only knew for the last 20 years, in the last 20 years, we've done like 90% of the emitting. So it's like a kind of, you don't have to go back too far.
Right. And instead of saying, well, it's everybody who's doing it, it's everything, now there is a methodology to be able to estimate, who and how much and
And
where
it
is
comes
it
down to a
coming from?
very small number of companies. 111 overall in their assessment, 10 companies that contributed half. But then,
And
like
it can
these are
be-
oil companies, so then it's also like who used the oil from these oil companies, and then it's tens of thousands of companies, of course, or whatever. It's the whole world used it.
Yeah. We'll see whether or not this this kind of information actually is used and is beneficial for the way that we approach, future litigation, future regulation, trying to fix the damages.
It says researchers have figured that every 1% of greenhouse gas put in the atmosphere since 1990 has caused 502 billion in damage from heat alone. It doesn't actually include the costs incurred by other extreme weather events such as hurricanes, droughts, and floods that may be side effects of global warming.
Well, it's
Meanwhile-
a good thing it's not a woman.
In an unsurprising move, current administration has ordered the abrupt winding down of the Women's Health Initiative. This was the National Institute of Health's landmark 3-decade effort into the health of postmenopausal women. 4 regional centers will lose their contracts in September.
Oh, postmenopausal. No wonder.
Yep.
I was going to say, if all the women are unhealthy, how can they be forced to bear children? But they're postmenopausal, so who cares?
Yeah, it should be run out of money by January 2026, putting its $10 million a year program at risk of disappearing completely.
Mm-hmm.
So it's started in 1991. The initiative has enrolled over 160,000 women in trials testing hormones, calcium, vitamin D, other interventions aimed at preventing heart disease, cancer, osteoporosis. Its findings have previously sort of reshaped what we thought was a good idea, showing that the combined estrogen-progestin therapy does not ward off heart disease. It shows that calcium and vitamin D supplements did not prevent fractures. The weed. Yeah. So scientists warn that ending the study now cuts off follow-up with some 42,000 participants. Many of these women are now in their 80s and 90s. And this is threatening the country's largest data set on healthy aging in women. This is coming as far deeper NIH cuts are coming. Something like $2.6 billion are part of the 35% reduction order. Although, now with the new Health and Human Services overseeing cancellations and wanting to completely redirect the focus of different researches, those numbers may actually be the cuts number might be a massive underestimation of what's about to happen, because that's how much is being cut. That is not including how much is going to be moved on to the new director's pet projects, which is going to come from existing project monies. So there's going to be a lot more cancellations than that $2.6 billion. It's just not going to be, it's just going to be shifting away from things like cancer research and vaccine research and disease research into why Florida makes frogs.
And to add on to this wonderful news, Nature published an analysis. They did a survey, found that 75% of scientists in the United States are thinking about leaving the United States in order to be able to do science.
Yeah.
Not that they will, but that it's suddenly it is something that researchers are really thinking about. So the brain drain is it's palpable. This is something that we should all be thinking about.
It's funny that so much of the narrative is about making sure that America is the best and that we're competitive and that we're great at things, and now like this is going to be a huge loss. That's hopefully, I hope all of these scientists and scientific programs leave so that they can continue, so we don't lose the potential knowledge gained over the next probably more like 12 or 15 years because of the time it would take to restart these things and raise new funds and all these things. So I weirdly wish I hope that they will, and I wish them all the best. So
what would be another country to go to for science? This is John Hogan. Anywhere in Europe right now. Everywhere in Europe seems to be funding science.
Yeah, and inviting graduate students and others,
and not put it. So we have students who who are in an ICE prison with no charges currently. It's
that's what I was going to say.
We're not going to get international
students losing
anymore,
visas. We have
think of the insanity. You apply to a college. You get in, you go through an immigration filings and all the things that you need to do. You spend money to secure housing and travel. Just that's the small part.
In some cases, you fall in love and you marry a citizen, and that should be enough.
And you pay for the schooling because it's not free. Although sometimes the foreign countries will pay you to be able to, because they have free education. They'll pay for you to study abroad. And then the insane authoritarian government throws you in a immigration prison for zero legal reasons, zero crimes. Like what is being done to this country right now? I'm sort of laughing, like in a way that you do, like in a post-apocalyptic situation where like oh, what are we gonna do? Just laugh.
It's when you've broken your arm and it's hanging and you're still full of adrenaline and you're laughing at it because it looks so ridiculous before the adrenaline drops and then you start to really feel it. That's the laugh that's happening right now.
That's it.
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
Is it. Oh, that's gonna hurt. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
what
so
can
insane.
scientists do? What can people do? Do what you can to keep going. Do what you can to
leave the country while you can before you're
do what you can to be safe, and if do what you feel you can with your time and your energy to feel part of the solution.
Or come to California. We're gonna resist.
Yeah.
That's if you're a scientist, just come to California. We're setting up the resistance. I noticed California is raising taxes on everything right now. Don't let that scare you. It's because we're gonna self-fund because we.
Yeah, it's
we need
actually this is pretty off topic, but we have a few counties in California, specifically in Northern California, that are starting enormous lawsuits to try to protect people in California from certain activities. It's pretty cool, actually. So I feel very privileged to be where I am right now, and I won't be leaving for a while.
Yep. Hopefully we can, though, take our privilege and use it to help share knowledge, share information, and to help if we can. That's what we're trying. On a different note, everybody, there were headlines this last week. Everyone was like, oh my God, the JWIST, the telescope, it found life on an exoplanet. Oh my gosh. There was no possibly, there was no kind of a very little equivocation when it first came out. Anyway, some researchers just published a paper in the archive preprint server called Prospects for Detecting Signs of Life on Exoplanets in the JWIST Era. And it is going to be published, so peer-reviewed and published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. Well-known planetary scientist Sarah Seeger from MIT and a bunch of co-authors have basically written the paper going, that's not the answer. And no, JWIST may never actually detect life elsewhere in space. So there's a lot of variability to transmission spectra. They're far away. The resolution is a little difficult. And so this paper in what they have written is essentially breaking down the requirements to say we found a sign of life on an exoplanet. And so the Webb is very exciting because we get these atmosphere transmission spectroscopy, and we can take a look at all this stuff. But what they say is that as we're looking at it, the questions need to be 3 criteria. If a biosignature detection is reliable, is the signal robust? So JWIST has, good detection ability, but is it a little tiny signature that we're seeing, or is it actually like, whoa, that's a big signal? Are we attributing it correctly? Are the spectral features correctly attributed to the appropriate gases? Which it's very possible that things mix together and we're not seeing it. I mean, if you think about it, this is the signature from a whole planet and the atmosphere, and things could change from day to day, off and on. And we're just like, hey, look at that spectra. And then the interpretation. So how reliable are the derived planetary properties? How good a job have we done in detecting it? And according to the authors, this tentative detection of what is called DMS or DMDS doesn't meet any of these criteria. They say, to quote, the example of the tentative detection of DMS in K2-18b's atmosphere is the exoplanet's community's first encounter with a biosignature gas prospect, a claim that fails all 3 key criteria above. We conclude with the sobering realization that with JWIST, we may never be able to definitively claim the discovery of a biosignature gas in an exoplanet atmosphere. They still say it's going to be the flagship of discovery and cool detections, and it's going to be remembered as the first telescope to make really concrete steps towards seeing this stuff. But don't take those headlines too seriously.
Can you explain to me why the headlines said that? What were they grabbing onto? That
there was a study last week. What?
Oh,
hey, what?
No, I was going to tell you exactly what it is. Okay. Hey, here's what this story sounds like. Why don't we make it really sound like that, and then we'll get 200,000 views for our advertisers.
Yes, I understand, but what specifically were they glomming onto?
Well, the authors were very excited, and they did caveat stuff, but at the same time, it was like, we found this signal, it's this strong, blah, 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 and the press release that goes out from the paper and all this stuff, it's easier to say they found a sign of life than to say, maybe, they found this, maybe we should look at it more carefully and really ask deeper questions. But yeah.
So
clicks are important.
So they found a reading that could be associated with life, but could also be associated with a lot of other things. And we don't have any tools to measure it further. So
and it might not be reliable. Exactly.
So it could be that it's in there. It's just depending on how you want to look at it. Like, I was covering a story that I think just got published today. That is about adolescent use of cannabis gummies post legalization in Canada. Okay.
Yep. Right. More poison centers.
No, it's from surveys, but it goes up. Like 1.3%, 1.2%, 2%, depending on the province, right? Goes up a little bit. That the youth were already doing this, but now it increased a little bit now that it's legal. But they had a regressive analysis, which they used Quebec as sort of like a control. Because in Quebec, it wasn't legalized. And so it seems like a pretty good thing to tie this statistical thing, a place where it wasn't. Only for some reason in Quebec, usage went down by 2% So what ends up happening is statistically, because you're comparing a slight increase over here to a decrease on the other side, what happened was it showed the reports are going to be out showing a 40-50% increase in adolescent use, because the regressive model, it's like, what's the level of my pool? I'll compare it to what's the level of my pool in a rainstorm? I'll compare it to a swimming pool that's draining, and we'll see how much rain is in my. That's as ridiculous as that sounds. That's kind of what that model is. So you're going to see, like in Canada, anybody who doesn't want to the legalization is going to be showing 40 to 50% increases from this study, because it is technically there in a regressive model that unfortunately tied it to a declining number, and so that it made the other number look like it was a. Anyway, it's dumb, but this also, like when you're trying to translate science to the general public, it's possible that you don't know the science well enough to communicate it.
Mm-hmm. Either that, or it's easier to say "sign of life discovered."
Yeah, or there's a bias in there, or you want to make
story.
it sound intriguing. Like when I first started doing this, I got in trouble quite a bit for trying to make too sexy of a title to the stories, because they would get a lot of clicks, but it's like I did this one story where they found unicorns.
Might be misdirecting. It might not.
They found unicorns in South Africa, and then you get into the study and you find out in cave paintings.
Right. Not unicorns.
Okay, but everybody who went and clicked on that thought they were getting a unicorn, and I knew it. I knew what they were going in for, and I gave them a unicorn. Come on, I gave you a unicorn. It just wasn't,
the unicorn they wanted. Yeah.
Right, and then I think some of it's that too, because those clicks are going to get them. Those advertisers are probably getting the 200,000 to 400,000, maybe more, maybe thousands of clicks that they wouldn't have done if they said JWIST finds interesting signal that turns out to be nothing.
But I think Kiki's point is also important. The researchers were excited, and some scientists are really good at describing their research to the layperson, and some are not. And it's possible that the way that they described it, somebody who's not super well versed on all the concepts heard sign of life.
Yeah, it's a game of telephone when it comes down to it. Last story for the night, because I really want to leave on a high note, deathbots.
Excellent. This is like old school TWIS. I love it. Gimme.
Yeah. Do you know what deathbots are?
Is it that new thing coming out from the electric car company guy?
No. So deathbots apparently are an increasing use of technology that takes digital technology, taking records of people who have died and making copies of them, like chat bots or other thing that people, the loved ones, can interact with.
So they have this at a Holocaust museum where
they do.
Where they had, before they passed, survivors did a ton of video work that could answer questions and kind of interact as though they were there with an audience. This is a very early version. This is a very crude early version.
Yeah.
So
but that's more like a dichotomous key, right? Like you would ask a question and it'd be like, this is the answer I'm going to give you, this pre-recorded answer.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
there's all pre-recorded stuff. So this is pre like AI taking over and embodying the thing, right? But just as an example, like there've been sort of attempts to sort of conceive of this before, but now I guess that we have the AI that can talk to you all at once.
Right. So we're beginning to integrate AI technologies. We can reproduce deceased's images, voices, and create interactive, quote unquote, digital humans or death bots. As this paper that was.
We may need this one day. Because there's going to be a point when we are just too old to do the show. And we and we can have the deathbots bringing the weekly science news for the next
generation.
2,000 episodes. Yeah.
Keep it going, friends. I mean, us. This paper, though, I enjoyed the thought exercise of it, but it was a lot. Co-construction with deathbots, a form of existentialist practice, published in Humanities and Social Science Communications this last week. And the authors investigated from a philosophical standpoint how deathbots becoming more lifelike as digital humans, how that will impact our understanding of life.
Bad.
And so we have pictures, we have writings, letters. You can go back through a trip down memory lane and be able to relive memories yourself, right? You can go through and think about them and think about experiences and, oh, they did this and said this. And, it keeps people with you in a sense, but they're still not there to talk with you. And so, the question of whether or not these digital humans, deathbots, would be capable of answering questions in a way that the person who has passed might have answered them. So maybe deathbots could be used in post-loss therapy to help people work through grief issues. But maybe
I feel like this would make it worse.
Maybe you'd never lose that person because
that's exactly what your deathbot would say. Blair? That's exactly what your deathbot would say.
What?
I don't know if you should do this.
Having a deathbot?
I think this is going to make it. I think this is going to make it worse. I don't know why you're interacting with me. This can't be good for you.
That's what my.
This is what your deathbot.
That's what my deathbot would say.
That's what
correct.
your deathbot would be saying.
Yes.
And actually, we're perfect candidates for this because we've got thousands of hours of us talking and interacting. Like if you're trying to get somebody's deathbot off of a Facebook post, like, what are they going to be? It's like, what have you eaten today? Are you hungry? Look at this food. Look at this food. Like whatever people are posting. Some people, they're just going to be talking about their cats. We're going to be rambling on forever on any subject. It's going to be fantastic. Our deathbots are going to be like fully us.
That's right. But so the question is, they raise a lot of questions, which I think are really interesting because, humans and humanity, we are aware of a limited amount of time. We're aware of mortality. And it is something that we deal with in our understanding of life and how we live it. And if deathbots can become tools to replace the deceased, beyond that, deal with grief, temporary painkillers, could they become, they ask here, cyber drugs? What kind of philosophical and ethical dilemmas will we face when deathbots can achieve no difference from real humans? When death is not necessarily a loss any longer, when death is not a limit. So how could this cyber realm, this eventuality impact our existence and our acceptance of life? I think it's, there were a lot of words in this paper, and I was like, oh, goodness, you got a lot of words here. But I think the basic questions are really fascinating, and especially as artificial intelligence and things like long-termerism are trying to push at that cyber future where humans don't even need to be human. We could just be in, a construct. We could become just digital beings. I think understanding these potential questions and seeing them as, not just science fiction. I mean, it is still science fiction, but actually something that we should think about and consider how we want to integrate and incorporate these kinds of things into our lives.
So I still think it's pre-industrial technology, because this is what books have done. Like I can sit down and have a long, very one-sided conversation with Friedrich Nietzsche. Okay, I can hear for hours and hours and hours and hours. I can hear his thoughts on many, 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 many subjects by reading the book. Now it's a one-way communication, because but
But who
with
has
AI,
to look anymore when you go to your chat bot and you're like, oh, I don't even have to read. I'm going to ask you the specific question, and they answer in the
Yeah.
voice of that dude. And
and
then
if
it
it's
becomes
based on the volumes of opinions that you put in there, it might be in a book you didn't have on the shelf, and it might be like, hey, actually, this is what I think about that.
and then
Kind of
it's your
cool.
loved ones. And
Well, I'm not saying that, but I'm saying
your
what
loved
an
ones can
interesting
continue to
way.
give you advice.
What an interesting way to interact with somebody who has put down several books on a subject. What an interesting way to have a conversation.
So there's Star Trek episodes about this, by the way.
Oh yeah, many. Like whenever the holodeck gets
Geordi at one point falls in love with a holodeck representation of a woman's book. And then he ends up meeting the woman later, and it's disastrous.
Awkward.
But but I think that this pulls at a whole separate issue, which we're currently dealing with, where AI models can pretend to be current people. And then you have to watch it and go, did this person really say this thing, or is this a fake video? I recently was fooled for a moment about a fake Elon Musk video, and I kind of kept watching it, and I noticed that his mouth wasn't moving quite right, and then I kind of looked into it further and went, oh yeah, okay, it's AI. But so that's currently happening with people that are currently alive. But then if you do that with people after they've died, especially in this era where, like you're talking about, Justin, we all have a digital footprint. How are you going to be able to know what was produced by this person's death bot and what was actually something that they once recorded? And it gets harder and harder to separate those out and maintain the integrity of the real person's past, right?
Yeah, and they do raise this this question actually, which is the honoring who they were and the what is the wording that they have a specific discussion of how this would work, and basically dealing with the respecting the dead. And did they record things before they died, be like the Holocaust Museum individuals that they wanted to be used? Were they kind of manipulated into signing away their rights to the recording contract or the movie producers that they were involved in? Did people take their family take their digital products and basically everything about them and create a digital them without their permission after they were dead? So are we going to have special add-ons to our wills? I would like to be living forever. Or not.
So they put actors who've died into movies, which I always get a little hinky about. I feel uncomfortable every time I'm seeing this. But we're Pandora's box. Once it's open, hey, you don't go back. There's billions of people unrecorded by history. They have a footprint in the generations that exist today, but we know nothing. We barely know our own great-grandparents' story. Our great-grandparents' story is almost invisible to us. And great-great-great-grand... Who? How many of them?
Right, how many of them got published like Nietzsche? Right.
But as we go forward, as we have these footprints, if my great-great-great-great whichever family member had written 500 letters and maybe did a couple of journals, diaries and journals and stuff, it would kind of be interesting to read those. And it would be kind of interesting also if you did slap those all into an AI so you could try to ask questions. And the biggest thing is, the most important thing that AI needs to address is that it needs to be able to go, I don't know.
Or to say, I'm not really this person. I am a I am a database of these writings. I am not this person.
But you're calling it deathbot, which means it's got to be post-mortem, which is then, it's fine.
Is it though?
Yeah.
No.
Oh, wait, why not?
It's
This
about
this is the question. Yeah.
it's about consent, first of all, right? Like, did Fred Astaire consent to dancing with a mop? Did he?
No,
Did his
he would have
family
hated
consent
that.
to that?
No. If it was they wanted an
And that was the
umbrella.
controversy at the time, was that Fred Astaire would never have agreed to do that, right? So like, so I'm sounding a million years old again. I'm seeing people are like, what are you talking about? This is like very early days for those of you who are Gen Z, I guess, if we have any Gen Z people watching. In the mid 90s, I want to say, like when CGI was like still brand new and not good. They figured out a way to make Fred Astaire dance with a Swiffer, I think, or something like that, in a commercial on TV, and everyone was
So bad.
livid. Yeah.
Well, this was a bit. Yeah. This is the kind of problems we had back in the 90s. If you were born in the aughts or whatever, sorry, things have gotten a little more intense. But back then, augmenting a classic film star for a moment, sampling is what kids would call it. Mm-hmm. Actually, in the late 90s, maybe. But yeah, I don't know. I think I'm a little less. I think if you're using it in a 1984 sense, where you're trying to change history or something like that, then it becomes. Then I can see it becoming an issue. If you're talking about people unfairly augmenting things, then I think, yeah, but that's going to be, that happens in real time all the time by people how many people have been quoted the same line that Einstein said this or Lincoln said this or Gandhi said this? They never said anything like that. People misattribute, sometimes intentionally. People do all this, misinformation exists.
Right.
But if
and so
you're talking about creating a digital time capsule for the future generations of your family to interact with, I'm all for it. I think that would be brilliant.
I think it's that is the question though, and the philosophical perspective is, as humans, we interact with everything, and we control the conversation we're having, the use of the technology, our understanding, and most likely we're going to have lots of different opinions, and some people are going to be like, this is great, and other people are going to say no, and but at the same time, the evolution is of the technology is happening, and
I feel like my
we need to
deathbot would
consider
interrupt
how
people a lot. Like it wouldn't be that fun to interact with. It's like, so we want to ask a question. Yeah, I don't want to talk about that. I got this other thing I wanted to say.
So let me get this straight. You just interrupted to talk about how
it was performative. It was performative.
Got it.
It was performative. I tried to wait till she was had wound down gotten the main thing out there, but then I had to be performative of it. Anyway, I'm all for it. Make me a digital death bot. Let's roll.
I don't know if I want an AI company doing that. I don't know if I want a social media company doing that. I mean, it's a little different than a book of photos. And this is something that needs to be considered. But the idea that this technology is moving forward, that there are going to be these and are developing these digital humans, digital representations, making it work. What do you want, everyone? Would you want to have a death bot for your loved ones? Would you consent to that? How far would you consent? Fada, you'll hold out for a hologram, right? Or a holodeck. Totally different thing, but still along the spectrum. Very interesting thing to think about. I hope this show got you thinking about a few things. I think a lot about things, and it's great to come here and talk and consider them with you. Thank you all for listening. We hope you enjoyed the show. It's time for some shout outs. Shout out to Fada for all your help in the social media and show notes. Gord, Aaaand, Laura, others for manning the chat rooms, making sure people are being nice and respectful. Identity 4, thank you for recording the show. Rachel, thank you for editing. And of course, it is time to thank our Patreon sponsors. Thank you to Robert W. Farley, Lauren Gifford, Dana Lewis, Eden Mundell, Alan Viola, Aaron Anathema, Arthur Kepler, Craig Potts, Mary Gertz, Teresa Smith, Richard Badge, Bob Coles, Kent Northcote, George Corris, Biero, Bella Zarb, John Ratness, Swami, Chris Wozniak, Vigard, Chef Sad, Donathan Styles, aka Don Stylo, Ali Coffin, Shubru, Sarah Forfar, Don Mundus, PIG, Stephen Alberon, Daryl Myshak, Andrew Swanson, Fredis 104, Sky Luke, Paul Ronovich, Kevin Reardon, Noodles Jack, Brian Carrington, David E. Youngblood, Sean Clarence Lamb, John McKee, Greg Raleigh, Mark Hessenplo, Steve Leisman, aka Zima, Ken Hayes, Howard Tan, Christopher Rappin, Richard Brendan Minish, Johnny Gridley, Remy Day, G. Burton Lattimore, Flying Out, Christopher Dreyer, RDM, Greg Briggs, John Atwood, Rudy Garcia, Dave Wilkinson, Rodney Lewis, Paul, Philip Shane, Kurt Larson, Greg Landon, Sue Doster, Jason Olds, Dave Neighbor, Eric Knapp, Lon Makes, EO, Adam Mishkan, Kevin Parachan, Aaron Luthen, Bob Calder, Marjorie, Baldy Disney, Patrick Pecoraro, and Tony Steele. Thanks to all of you for your support on Patreon. And if anyone out there is interested in having their name read at the end of the show or in, just helping out a bit, please head over to twist.org and click on that Patreon link on next week's show.
We will be back Wednesday, 8 p.m. Pacific Time, broadcasting live from our Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook channels.
Want to listen to us as a podcast? Perhaps while you search for alien life. That's what I was trying to say.
I thought you were using some fancy Shakespearean words.
Perchance to pod. Just search for This Week in Science wherever podcasts are found. If you enjoyed the show, get your friends to subscribe as well.
For more information on anything you've heard here today, show notes, links to stories will be available on our website, www.twist.org. And you can also sign up for a newsletter that we promise not to send.
I don't promise. I don't promise.
Someday, we'll see. It'll be such a surprise. Like, what the heck is this? We love your feedback. If there's a topic you would like us to cover or address or a suggestion for an interview, please let us know on one of our social media accounts, or better move, just send us an email. You can go to twist.org to figure out what those are. Just put TWIS, TWIS, in the subject line, or your email will be recycled into a new email, and there'll be a slight degradation, and then it'll get recycled into a new email with a slight degradation until, before you know it, there'll be no email at all, and we won't have been able to read it.
We look forward to saying words and having a conversation. Hopefully, it will still be legal to talk about science next week. If you learned anything from this show, remember,
it's all in your head.
This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science, it's the end of the world. So I'm setting up shop, got my banner unfurled. It says the scientist is in, I'm gonna sell my advice. Show them how to stop the robots with a simple device. I'll reverse global warming with a wave of my hand. And all it'll cost you is a couple of grand. 'Cause this week's science is coming your way. So everybody listen to what I say. I use the scientific method for all that it's worth, and I'll broadcast my opinion all over the earth. 'Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in Science.
Ooh, This Week in Science.
Blair is tired.
I am tired as well. It is the after show. And I have been tired today. Trying so hard.
The amount of coffee I've consumed today is insane, and I am going to crash any moment.
It happens at a certain point, right? If you can prop up for so long, and then you're like, I have to go to bed now.
I completely fell asleep when I disappeared to take care of my little one because it was dark in there. So I sat down in the chair with him and I fell asleep immediately. My body was like, nighttime?
Yep. Sleep now. Cozy child. Nighttime dark. Go bed.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
Luckily,
funny.
Brian was there, so he took over.
Did he wake you
and
up?
sent me out. Yeah.
Oh gosh, that's hilarious.
I've never fallen asleep so easy in my whole life. I think it's because I just am operating sleep deprived all the time.
You're exhausted.
So my body's just like water. It's sleep.
Exactly.
5 minutes? Yes, please.
I know. Yeah. Justin, where'd you go? He said he's on audio only. So if he's wearing his headphones, he's listening. Yeah. But hey everybody. I hope you're all doing well and maintaining in the deluge. And we're gonna keep talking about science and what's going on. Oh, did you see the new executive order today?
Which one?
The one that is going after the organizations that accredit universities.
No, how fun.
I know.
Dumbing everyone down is part of the plan.
No, the plan is you can just sell the degree.
That's a benefit.
You don't have to do all the go to school stuff.
That's a particular person's upside.
You can just
but the
hand
people
out
who
those
back
degrees for
that
money.
person don't want higher education, because the more higher education, first of all, the more left-leaning people become, the more higher education they receive. Yes,
left-wing knowledge.
But also they understand science better. They promote more environmentalist agendas. They promote more acceptance of other people because they are exposed to more people in those institutions, and so they don't want it. They want to shut down the colleges.
And if you don't move that forward, well then, or you can have private stuff, and private companies will do all the research. Private companies, I don't know where they'll get their future employees. But yeah, if you don't have education and all that, then people don't think.
Yeah, pretty much every job now requires at least an AA, if not a BA.
Bachelor's for ridiculously everything. Yeah.
If we shut down all the colleges,
ooh, I want to watch Andor. Yeah. Then how job do thing? I don't know.
How job do you think? But again, also, is that the plan? Are we all supposed to be poor and stupid? Is that the plan?
I think it is.
Yeah, Pensacola says just bring a despot to the interview.
Hungry and tired. Yeah, then
that's gonna make it great. Oh my gosh.
Then no one can revolt. I don't know. Just saying.
Yep. Yeah.
There's a thing to go look at. It's a stupid. I'm gonna call it stupid.
I want to watch Andor.
There's a song called "Ban This Song" that I saw on a YouTube video that I think summarized it very well.
Nice.
It's like ban this, ban that, ban this, ban that. It's like all part of the plan. Really well done.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Educate yourselves, everyone. It's good. I'm glad that you're here with us.
Okay, so I have a serious question to ask. You don't have to answer on air if you don't want to.
Mm-hmm.
But this is a serious question because we're getting to the point where this is could be an issue. If what we're doing here becomes illegal, do you still want to continue? Because my answer is yes. And I will put that out. You don't have to. You can ask me afterward. But it's like a legitimate kind of a question that's being required. There are students who are being in ICE detention for having an opinion that the government didn't like. If they're shutting down academic and research and having an anti-science agenda, a show like this that promotes science, well, I'm not saying we're in the crosshairs exactly, if what we're doing here becomes illegal, could you see yourself continuing?
I know that we have adapted to change in the past. And look where we are.
You're asking us on a recording on the internet to
And I told you don't have to answer.
admit that we would do something that could be illegal. I feel like it's
Tell on
not
yourself.
wise to say that as the person in the
Right.
room who is not a cis white man, especially.
Who are you calling white? Like, they don't consider me white. The white people, like, don't think I'm white. Like, there's people who aren't white who think that I'm white, and there's people who are like me who kind of pass as white. The white people don't think I'm white. But that's a whole other thing.
Whole other conversation.
I can tan
You know,
without a cream.
I don't.
I have
tan
never
very well.
owned sunscreen. But that's beside the point. I'm saying is like I could see myself still trying to do this show if it was illegal. And because like I feel like this is what a lot of the country is having to sort of face.
Because you're going back to Denmark. No.
Yeah, might have to. Like, hey, I think my residency is still good now, but I could definitely seek asylum in the future. But if we're getting to a point because there's a lot of people whose normal life that was not illegal is becoming illegal.
Yep.
By decree. Their arrangements that they made for university or to be on the path for citizenship and paying taxes with the Social Security card that just paid in, didn't pay out unless they became a citizen at some point, are being withdrawn. They're talking about taking...
Don't you think the publications would stop before we would?
Well, the
Probably,
publications,
but the
won't
publications will be
of U.S. research. They're like we know there's research from all over the world. Now, I happen to prefer the American research because just between you and me, it is better.
I mean,
now?
you know,
But when I'm getting
what is peer review?
when I'm
It
getting
depends
the-
on what field you're talking about, I think. But like,
when I'm getting the Nature journal articles written by people who have been given an accredited degree or paid for one or decreed by merit that they deserved it, and they're talking about how fluoride has been causing the liberalization of America or whatever nonsense becomes the propaganda disguised as science, then I'm going to be calling that out. I think I've been doing this show for too long to like not.
It's just gonna be like we're gonna be like the eye roll at the science propaganda show. Yeah, some touch-ups, exactly, Pepsi Cola. There's some
We'd have to
deliberation.
re-roll the show out with a new name, and it would be sock puppets instead of us. Like, obviously. It may
I
be
see you've been
Justin,
working on
again,
this
you are
plan for
saying
decades.
this on the internet, recorded. You need to stop.
No, that's rule number 1 of being an activist is shut your mouth, and I never
You
learned
don't.
that rule. I never learned that rule, and it's you're 100% right, but I never learned the rule.
Yeah, some
I
week in
admit.
sometimes science. That would be good. Yes. Yeah.
Somewhere in science.
I think your question really highlights some people, not everybody, but what
There's people
some
going
are
through this now.
thinking about right now and what they're going through. So I think
Yeah.
highlighting that is really important, and maybe people will start thinking differently, or considering things for the future. Yeah. Anyway, everyone, I'm exhausted tonight.
Okay, I'm sorry.
It's 10:45 here. I gotta go.
Okay. Hey, say goodnight, Blair.
Good night, Blair. Say good night, Justin.
Good night, Justin. Good night,
Night,
Kiki.
Kiki.
Good night, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another episode of This Week in Science. We'll be back again next week. Not sometime somewhere, but actually next week. We'll see you then.
We'll plot the
Stay
resistance
safe.
in the after show. That would be
Stay safe. Stay healthy. Stay curious. Stay lucky.